Howdy, hey, hi, Spaceman Josh here, and welcome back to another one of my vlogs. So this one, like I mentioned in the previous one, I'm going as well as some of my videos, I'm going to have these be more educational based. Instead of doing nerd alerts in all my games, I'm going to have a lot of my educational portions in here. And so one of the first things I wanted to do was the different types of moons. What's interesting is that there actually are there's a name for almost every every full moon you can experience in a year. There's a name for just about every single one of them, a special name. And so I wanted to go through this episode and sort of go through what those are. Now, so first off, is actually a name for every single the first full moon of almost every single month. There is a special name for. January is called the wolf moon, or the old moon is the first full moon in January. February you have the snow moon, or the hunger moon. March you have the worm moon, or the death moon. I actually heard the worm moon before I did all this research. It was sort of it's interesting because it's essentially the idea of the frost and like the snow is all melting away, and the worms emerge from the ground and point themselves towards the moon. Things of that sort of weird little things like that, and that's sort of where some of these names can kind of get their names from. Like April is the pink moon, or the egg moon. If I had to guess, I'd probably guess the egg moon name probably came from Easter being in April. May has the flower moon, also called the milk moon. I have no idea why. I like the fact that it's called a milk moon. I don't know why it's called that though. June has the strawberry moon, or the rose moon. July has the buck moon, or the thunder moon. August has a sturgeon moon, or the red moon. That I actually have a little more knowledge on. Some of the Native American tribes, I don't remember which ones, but essentially they called the first full moon in August the sturgeon moon because that was the kind of fish available in the river that they were by around that time of year. November is called the beaver moon, or the morning moon. And so you can kind of notice it skipped over September and October. I didn't see anything for those. If they do, I wasn't able to find it. If you do know those and those do have names, put them in the comments below. I'm always open to learning new knowledge, and it helps everyone else. So, and then December has just one name. It's called the cold moon because it's cold in December for the northern hemisphere. And then there's also some other ones that aren't related to sort of the time of the which month it is. So one of them is an actual phase of the moon. It's called the new moon. This is technically a lot of people call it a dark full moon. It's essentially when you have a full moon, it's because the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth as the sun, so all the light from the sun gets reflected off the moon, and we see the entire circle that is the moon. Now, a new moon is essentially the exact opposite, where the moon is in between the Earth and the sun, and so you end up with something where that you can't see any of the moon unless it's a silhouette during a total solar eclipse, or just solar eclipse in general. And so there are some people who consider a new moon a full moon, but it's a dark full moon. And so there's also another name with that, with the black moon, where it would be the second new moon in any month. And of course there's also the more commonly known blue moon, which is a second full moon in any given month. And then there's also a wet moon, or a Cheshire moon. It's where the horns of a crescent moons, so essentially the ends of it are pointing up, sort of creating a smile, like the Cheshire cat. There's also the super moon, which it's basically when it appears bigger. I actually drew a diagram for you all for that. So the reason why it appears bigger is because if you don't know, the moon sort of orbits the Earth. So this is the symbol for the Earth. This is the symbol for the moon. So the moon orbits the Earth in what's called an elliptical orbit, as do most astronomical objects. For orbiting other things, they tend to orbit in ellipses. And so basically it's just an oval. And this is exaggerated. It's not this extensive, but essentially when the moon is sort of on this side of the orbits, it because it's closer, it appears bigger. And also on the flip side, when it's farther away, it appears smaller. And another thing with that is also with some of the optics of the way that light travels in our atmosphere. When the moon is closer to the horizon, it also appears bigger then. So if it's closer in its orbit and it's near the horizon, it's going to appear a lot bigger than when it's farther away and high up in the sky. It may not be noticeable for most people, but it's still something that's relatively noticeable enough for us we have this name of supermoon. And then there's also the harvest moon. It's sort of I had to sort of dig into that a little bit because it's like one of those things where it's like I was growing up, I always heard the name and I always just thought it was when the moon looked yellow. That's sort of what I was taught, but it's not really that's not really what it is. It actually is an actual thing though. It is the full moon nearest to the autumnal equinox. So the fall equinox. Essentially, there is the fall equinox and the spring equinox. The term equinox means equal day, equal night. So essentially, it's essentially that point in the day where you have the term, like the name says, it's equal day and equal night in the fall. The full moon nearest to that, whether it be before or after, but nearest to that next to the fall equinox, that's the harvest moon, and then the full moon immediately after that is what's called the hunter's moon. And then, of course, there's also one of my personal favorites, the blood moon or the vampire moon, which is essentially you get it during a total lunar eclipse. And another thing with the moon's orbit, so if this is sort of the plane that the Earth orbits the sun, the moon isn't on that plane as well; it's slightly off. And so, with the way that the physics works and the way that it orbits, sometimes sometimes those two planes sort of intertwine at certain places because they're both essentially planes, and so there are portions where they have sort of the same sort of points, and so every so often you can have a situation where not only is the moon a full moon, but it's also in a point where those planes intertwine, and so you have perfectly lined up the sun, the Earth, and then the moon, and so what ends up happening is the light from the sun. Some of it there's parts of it that go through the Earth's atmosphere, and as a result, the light bends a little bit and sort of goes around the atmosphere. Ends up hitting the moon still, but because it was bent, it also affected the wavelength of the light, which what that basically does is it changes the color. For the purpose of this, that's basically what it does. Is it changes the color, and so it makes the moon appear red. And so, that's essentially what ends up happening is the normal light that would normally hit the moon is being shadowed by the Earth, but the light that goes through Earth's atmosphere is being bent and still hitting the moon. So the moon appears red, almost like a blood-like color, hence blood moon. That's all I really have. Those are the ones that I was able to find. Again, if you have any more, if you know of any more, I highly recommend you put it in the comments below. I'm always open to learning new things, and so I hope you all are too. Thank you for traveling with me on this journey. Spaceman Josh, out.